She dedicated 15 years of her life to her husband, took care of the house, raised the children, gave up on herself. She believed in love, in partnership, and in the future they built together. But he traded it all for a young body and a face untouched by time. The new woman couldn't cook, couldn't stand children, but she knew how to smile at parties and spend money like no one else. While her ex-husband fell into a luxurious trap, Yoon-hee alone was rising again with a strength he never imagined. Why do some men trade an entire story for a fleeting illusion? Yoon-hee was 35 years old and had 2 young children when she felt something was wrong. It wasn't a normal argument or just daily stress. It was something colder, more silent. Min-jun had changed. He no longer smiled the same, avoided her touch, and their nights no longer ended with a kiss. They met in college, grew up together, and built a family with sacrifice and mutual support. When their first child was born, she gave up her career as an architect to care for the home and support her husband's career. It was supposed to be temporary, but the years went by and she never returned to herself. She was always there, for the birthdays, the illnesses, the victories. She was the one who pushed him forward even in moments when he wanted to give up. But now, Min-jun couldn't even look her in the eye. He came home late, left early, and always said he was handling things at the company. The excuses became repetitive. When she asked questions, he became defensive. She knew he was hiding something. Then one night, he said he needed time. She tried to understand. She asked if there was another woman. He denied it, but couldn't hold her gaze. That's when she realized the betrayal was already happening. She began to investigate quietly. She found a message on his phone, a heart emoji, a name she'd never heard before, Haeun. The woman was 20, beautiful, slim, with flawless makeup and eye-catching clothes. She worked as an event promoter, but what she really wanted was to enter the world of the wealthy. And in Min-jun, she saw her doorway in. Haeun wasn't interested in love. She was interested in status and expensive dinners, trips, and gifts. Min-jun, flattered by her youth, fell right into the trap. He began spending more and more on her. While back home, Yoon-hee could barely buy herself a new outfit without feeling guilty. He didn't have the courage to end things with dignity. He started disappearing on weekends, avoided any serious conversations. Until one day, he sent a short message. "I'm in a different phase now. I need to follow my path." And that was it. He left his wife and kids as if they were just dead weight from the past. Yoon-hee cried, a lot, but never in front of the children. 13-year-old Jin-soo stayed silent for days. 9-year-old Sumi slept wearing her father's shirt. Their pain was harder to bear than her own. But still, she got up every day, made breakfast, helped with homework, washed the dishes, put a smile on her face, even when she was falling apart inside. There was no time for sadness. There was a life to provide for, and she had to start from scratch. What she didn't know was that this would become the most powerful chapter of her life. Sometimes life breaks us just to rebuild us stronger. And when someone trades a whole woman for an illusion, life itself comes back to collect the price. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel now. So many people watch but don't subscribe, and that really hurts our growth. Leave a comment if you know someone who's been through something like this. Her story is only just beginning. When he walked out the door, he took only a suitcase filled with expensive clothes, but left behind something much heavier, the shattered pieces of a woman who once believed love was forever. Yoon-hee spent the first days in a daze. She barely slept, ate even less. The walls of the house felt like they were silently witnessing the death of a life that no longer existed. Though young, the children could feel it. Jin-soo locked himself in his room. Sumi cried at night, calling out for her dad. But Min-jun didn't check in, didn't text, didn't ask about them. It was as if his family had been erased from his memory. His silence was the most painful part. There was no conversation, no attempt to make things right, no apology, just abandonment. Yoon-hee had no choice but to rebuild herself. With the child support, late and never enough, she had to cut everything. Cable TV, canceled. Car, sold. Now she took the bus with her kids. Grocery shopping became a precise equation, no waste allowed. Even milk had to stretch further than before. Every decision was about survival now. And still, she held on to her dignity. She never begged Minjin for help. She never asked for anything. And though anger simmered inside her, she made one choice clear. Her children would not grow up hating their father. She'd say, "He's far away, but he's still your dad." And when they asked why he never came, she'd smile and say, "Maybe he's just busy." Inside, she was breaking. The pain was constant, quiet, like a slow crush against her soul. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal, but being discarded like she never mattered. She remembered all the nights she stayed up nursing him through illness, the jewelry she sold so he could start his company, the loneliness of pregnancy while he was away on business. None of it seemed to count anymore. But then, one ordinary morning, sipping coffee alone, she caught her reflection in the kitchen mirror. It was still her. Tired, pale, but her eyes still held fire. And for the first time in weeks, a thought came to her. She still had talent. She could still draw. She was still an architect. She just had to remember who she was before becoming only a wife and a mother. She called an old college friend, Yoonji, who worked at a small but respected architecture firm. She asked for help, said she'd work for free if needed. Yoonji welcomed her with a tight hug and tears. It wasn't just a job. It was a second chance. In the following days, Yoon-hee helped with small tasks, grabbing coffee, reviewing plans, organizing digital files. And with each day, pieces of her returned. Her talent hadn't died. It had only been sleeping. Even the kids noticed the change. Mom was still tired, but she smiled more, cried less. Soo-mi drew pictures for her to hang at the office. Jin-soo helped her with the computer. It felt like the three of them were building something new, a stronger family. Meanwhile, across town, Minjin was facing a different reality. Ha-yeon didn't like to share. She wanted everything. His bank account, his credit cards, lavish dinners, constant praise. And slowly, Minjin began to realize she didn't love him. She loved what he could offer. One day, he came home early and found an open chat on her laptop. She was talking to another man, laughing at Minjin, saying she was just getting what she deserved. That's when he realized he'd been played. He tried to argue, but Ha-yeon wasn't like Yoon-hee. She didn't stay quiet. She didn't tolerate criticism. She screamed, threatened, said she'd ruin his life. What started as passion had turned into war. And when he tried to call Yoon-hee to vent, she didn't answer. For the first time, he was tasting what he had served. And she, though still healing, was finally blooming. Sometimes karma takes its time, but it always shows up. The woman he left behind was now being noticed by small construction firms. Her name began to circulate in meetings, in architecture forums. One client in particular, Mr. Lee, from a children's foundation, was so impressed with one of her ideas, he hired her to redesign their entire education wing. The pay wasn't great, but the recognition was priceless. When she got her first paycheck and bought her children a small gift with her own money, she cried at the store counter. That wasn't just a purchase. It was proof. She could do it. It was the beginning of something real. The woman traded for a selfish girl was now facing the future with strength. And the man who threw her away was just beginning to learn the real cost of illusion. She no longer needed to prove herself to anyone, and yet she still felt the world watching, waiting for her to collapse. Yoon-hee woke before dawn, made breakfast for the kids, adjusted their school uniforms, smiled so they wouldn't worry, and then walked to the small makeshift office at the back of the house. Her days were spent deep in designs, sketches, and budgeting, keeping herself afloat while quietly nursing a wound that hadn't healed. What hurt most wasn't the absence of her husband, but the feeling that everything they had built together had been tossed aside like it meant nothing. For years, she had been the foundation of that home, and suddenly she was treated like something disposable. Still, she kept moving. It was like walking barefoot on glass, but with a heart full of resolve. One rainy Friday afternoon, the doorbell rang. She opened the door and saw Min-jun, hair messy, face tired, clothes soaked from the drizzle. He didn't say much, just asked if he could see the kids. Jin-soo stood frozen on the stairs, watching. Sumi curled up on the couch, tense. His presence brought discomfort, not comfort. He tried to smile, made small talk, brought expensive toys, but the kids didn't react. It was too late. Time had eroded the bond. Yoon-hee remained silent, just watching. He stayed barely 20 minutes, just long enough to realize that the love he shattered couldn't be glued back together with gifts. As he turned to leave, he looked at her and said, "You've changed." She answered calmly, "Maybe because I had to become someone new to raise our children." After that visit, he tried to come around more. He sent texts, suggested outings, said he wanted to reconnect, but the kids no longer believed in him. The father figure had faded. Meanwhile, Hyeon, the girl who once looked like a prize, revealed her true self. She stopped pretending, went out with friends, spent recklessly, and when Min-jun tried to set limits, she exploded. She called him a failure, said she'd never loved him, that she was only there for convenience. He tried to fix things, but she publicly accused him of being abusive on social media. His already fragile reputation collapsed. Clients withdrew, business partners distanced themselves. He was forced to sell off part of his company. The woman for whom he left his family was now destroying what was left of him. Unemployed, in debt, and without a home, he moved into a friend's apartment. Meanwhile, Yoon-hee was rising. She gained recognition in a new field, social architecture. Her name was mentioned in a local report for transforming abandoned spaces into community centers for kids and the elderly. She was invited to an online interview where she shared her journey. She never named anyone, but made it clear she had rebuilt herself after betrayal. The video went viral. Her inbox filled with messages from women all over the country, stories of pain, abandonment, and recovery. She had become a symbol. At home, Suni taped her mom's articles on the wardrobe. Jin-soo began asking about colleges. He wanted to become an engineer. For the first time in ages, Yoon-hee felt she was teaching by example, not just words. She hadn't just survived. She had won. One autumn morning while drafting a school project, her phone rang. It was the hospital. Minjun had been admitted after an anxiety attack. He was battling depression, wasn't eating, couldn't sleep. He had been diagnosed with extreme exhaustion. The news hit hard. For a moment, she remembered the man she once loved, and though he had hurt her deeply, she was still human. She went to the hospital. When she entered the room, she saw him pale, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw her, he cried. Not a word, just tears. She held his hand for a few minutes. She said she hoped he would heal, but she also told him he had to accept the consequences of his actions. He didn't just lose money, he lost trust, respect, and home. He nodded, silently. It wasn't reconciliation. It was farewell. She left the hospital with a calm heart. For the first time, she had forgiven. And forgiveness was freedom. Not for him, but for herself. Days later, she was invited to give a lecture at the university where she once studied, where she met Minjun. She stepped on stage with nerves in her stomach, but fire in her eyes. She talked about architecture, but also about rebuilding, of spaces, of self. She received a standing ovation. After the talk, a student approached her and said, I was thinking of quitting, but now I want to stay. You showed me it's worth it. That night, Yoonhee hugged her children and cried quietly. But it wasn't pain this time. It was relief. It was gratitude. The woman once replaced by an illusion was now an example. And somewhere in that same city, a man was facing the ruins of what he had destroyed for a fleeting passion. Sometimes, fate takes its time, but when it returns, it charges interest on everything we once took for granted. She never expected pain to make room for something new. After everything she'd endured, she swore never to trust another man again, to never lower her guard, never let someone get too close. Yet life has its own mysterious ways. In a humble cafe near the community center where she taught architecture to teens, she met someone who would change everything. He was low-key, polite, always sat at the same table, absorbed in technical books and sketching in a beat-up notebook. One day, by accident, their orders got swapped. He took her oat milk cappuccino, she sipped his strong espresso. And that's when they started laughing. His name was Dae-hyun, a civil engineer, widower, father to a teenage daughter. Nothing about him stood out at first glance. No flashy charm, no rehearsed lines, no showy vanity. But there was something rare in him, a quiet presence that comforted, a gaze that listened. They began to meet by chance, then by choice. She resisted, put up walls, made excuses, but he never pushed. He understood that wounded hearts need not hurry. They need respect. For the first time, she felt seen not as a broken woman, but as a whole one. One evening, exhausted after class, she sat on the bench in the square where he usually strolled. He arrived and quietly took his place beside her. Bit by bit, she told her story, betrayal, grief, struggle. He listened without interruption, and when she thought he might walk away, he said simply, "You don't deserve anything less than a calm, true, steadfast love." She wept, not from sorrow, but because she realized maybe a fresh start was possible. Time passed and the kids noticed. Jinsu, protective and cautious, took longer to warm up. Sumi, on the contrary, loved chatting with Dae-hyun. He welcomed her words like they mattered. He never tried to replace their father. He said, love doesn't have to erase, it just adds. One Sunday at lunch, as he helped set the table, Jinsu asked, "Why are you still here?" He replied, "Because I enjoy being with you, even when you don't need me." The boy didn't answer, but later that day, he let Dae-hyun walk him to school. It was a small gesture, but for Yoon-hee, it meant everything. She was no longer merely surviving. She was a woman, a mother, an inspiration, and now loved again. Minjun, on the other hand, had vanished. After the final hearing, he was spotted leaving the country. No address, no contact, just silence. His permanent absence closed the wound. And in that emptiness, Yoon-hee planted something new. On a cold winter night, Dae-hyun took her to the top of a hill where he used to walk with his daughter. From there, the city's lights glowed like stars. She asked why he brought her there. He answered, "Because this feels more beautiful when I'm with you." She smiled. They didn't need rings, grand speeches, or eternal vows. Just that moment, that peace. Yoon-hee learned that true love doesn't shout, demand, or pressure. It sneaks up quietly, takes your hand, and says, "I'm here." And it stays. On Sumi's birthday, Dae-hyun helped bake the cake. Jin-soo invited him to play cards. Watching them, Yoon-hee felt something she hadn't felt in years: wholeness. This wasn't the life she once dreamed, but it was better because it was built on truth, scars, courage, and a well-deserved new beginning. She no longer cried over Minjun's betrayals nor blamed herself. She understood. True love doesn't destroy, it builds. And she, after being broken, was now crafting her own story by her own hands. One day at an architecture event, she was asked to close the ceremony with a speech. Standing before a full audience, she declared, "Sometimes life takes everything away. Not to punish us, but to give us a chance to rebuild right. I was a wife, a mother, abandoned and erased. And today, I am someone who rediscovered her own strength. If you're in pain now, remember, this hurt is not the end. It could be the beginning of the best part of your life." Applause erupted. She stepped down, found Dae-hyun and the kids, and just smiled. Because in that instant, it all made sense. If this story moved you, and you believe fresh starts are real, subscribe now. Many watch till the end but forget to subscribe, and that helps us keep sharing stories like this. How about you? Have you experienced or witnessed an unexpected new beginning? Share in the comments. Your story might guide someone else.